Good morning, Year 11. I hope you're well and having a lovely day. Please could you write the date and the title, Introduction to Critical Style. So for your do now, I would like you to answer 3 questions, after considering the quote from Angela Carter. Language is power, life, and the instrument of culture, the instrument of domination and liberation. So your 3 questions are as follows. In what ways is language powerful? How do you change the language you use, depending on whether you are talking to your friends, parents, or teachers? And finally, how can language give you power over people, domination, or help you to overcome being dominated, liberation? Pause the video for about 5 minutes to answer these questions. So in terms of your answer to question 1, in terms of what ways language is powerful, you could link that to question 3 and talk about how it can be used to influence people, how it can be used to persuade people, how it can be used to communicate who you are and what you believe in with other people in the world around you. So it's a really powerful tool. In terms of how you might change your language, depending on your audience, you may use more colloquial or informal language when talking with your friends, perhaps slightly more formal language and avoidance of expletives when you're talking with your parents, and ideally, it doesn't always happen, you should be using your most formal language when talking with your teachers because you're trying to convey your knowledge and practice the formal writing that you should be using in your exams. So ideally, it's on a spectrum from colloquial to formal. In terms of your answer to question 3, how language can give you power over people or prevent you from being dominated, so maintaining your sense of power, links back to question 1, language can enable you to influence people and convey your point of view. If you think about the media, they often use language and language techniques to influence you, perhaps subliminally, and that can be a really powerful tool of manipulation because you may not understand or appreciate that you're being influenced. And this can be true for when you're talking to people. People can be manipulating you, either consciously or subconsciously, using language as a tool. And that's why it's really important that you are able to identify techniques and understand how language is used to prevent yourself being manipulated or dominated by other people. So do make sure you have some notes on that in your book. So what different styles of language are used at work? So at work, people often have to use a particular style of language depending on their profession. So I'd like you to consider how do people have to use language differently in the different jobs below? Write down examples of things they might say. So we've got a policeman, we've got a doctor, a teacher, and a lawyer. So pause the video now and consider how they use language differently and things they may say. So for the policeman, you could be slightly more colloquial, as there's no need to really impress people, though you wouldn't want to be too colloquial, as that may give an impression of not being professional. With regards to a doctor, you want to be very formal and factual, use technical jargon, so technical language relating to the medical profession, because it's really important that you inspire confidence in people and for your patients to get the impression that you're knowledgeable and have considerable expertise, so they trust you and take your advice. I would say the same points apply for a teacher and a lawyer. It appears to be a barrister in this picture. You would want to use technical jargon, though with regards to being a teacher, of course it depends on the age of your students. If you're teaching 5-year-olds, I would find that quite difficult. You'd have to make sure you'd adapt to your language so that you weren't using overly complex language which would confuse them. If you were teaching, say, in a university, that would be more like a doctor. You'd want to use technical language quite a lot in order to inspire confidence and I suppose teaching in the secondary school is somewhere in between the two. So you'd want to use some technical terms, but making sure you explain them, which I know I sometimes forget to do. But you'd want to use that expansive vocabulary to expand other people's vocabulary and once again inspire that sense of expertise in your audience. So pause the video to make sure you have some notes written down. So in terms of different writing styles, you have to write in different styles depending on what subject you are studying. So pause the video and look at the two pictures. How would you describe this differently in English and chemistry? And for the second one, how would you describe this painting differently in history and art? Pause the video now to jot down some notes. So for the first photo, if you were talking about chemistry, you may mention the types of chemicals being used, the nature of the reaction. If it was English, it would probably be a stimulus for a piece of creative writing, or it could even be Dr. Jekyll. So you would talk about the ideas and the themes and what's going on. You wouldn't be talking about the chemical reaction. With regards to the second painting, if you were talking about art, you would talk about the use of colour. I dropped art in year 8, I think, so I wouldn't really know what more to say. Use of colour, maybe when it was painted, perhaps perspective, so some people are bigger in the front and then people at the back are smaller, things like that. I'm sure some of you could talk about it in more detail from an artistic perspective. In terms of history, I did that to A-level, so I could say more about it from a historical perspective. You could talk about what war it was, the battle that maybe happened, the situation of the soldiers, how far into the war it was, the conditions they were enduring, the camaraderie maybe that they had between them, the orders they'd encountered, what they were going to do next. So that's the kind of thing, those are the kind of things you would talk about describing it from a historical perspective. So pause the video and jot down some notes. So in this unit, we are going to be looking at the writing style you need to use when answering reading questions in your English language papers and when you are writing essays in English literature. So why is critical style important? To get a grade 6 or above in English literature, you need to write in a critical style. It will give you the skills to strengthen your argument. Using the correct vocabulary makes your analysis of language and structure more sensitive and precise. It will help build your vocabulary and will help improve your formal writing. Pause the video to make notes of this now. Okay, so we're going to read an extract from the autobiography Cider with Rosie by Laurie Lee, where Lee remembers a snowy winter's day as a child. While we are reading the extract, think about this question. How does Laurie Lee use language and structure to make his description of winter so memorable? This is a genuine question from the 2017 exam paper. Your task is to annotate the text, thinking about what points you could make. Remember, a copy of the text is on class charts. So let's read through together. So, armed with these and full of hot breakfast, we stepped out into the winter world. It was a world of glass, sparkling and motionless. Vapours had frozen all over the trees and transformed them into confections of sugar. Everything was rigid, locked up and sealed, and when we breathed the air, it smelt like needles and stabbed our nostrils and made us sneeze. Having sucked a few icicles and kicked the water butt to hear its solid sound, and breezed through the frost on the front window pane, we ran up into the road. We hung around, waiting for something to happen. A dog trotted past, like a ghost in a cloud, panting his aura around him. Now the winter's day was set in motion, and we rode through its crystal kingdom. We examined the village for its freaks of frost, for anything we might use. We saw the frozen spring by the side of the road, huge, like a swollen flower. We saw trees lopped off by their burdens of ice, cow tracks like potholes, in rock quiet lumps of sheep licking the spiky grass with their black and rotting tongues. The church clock had stopped, and the weathercock was frozen, so that both time and the winds were stilled, and nothing, we thought, could be more exciting than this. Read through this answer. What do you think the candidate has done well, and how could it be improved? Laurie mentions his hot breakfast in a short one-line paragraph, separating the heat from the cold of winter. The word hot shows this contrast between warmth and cool, allowing Lee to show that this wintry day is special, setting it apart from normal life. Lee uses metaphors and similes to make his description of winter memorable. For example, vapors had frozen all over the trees and transformed them into confections of sugar. This helps the reader to imagine the trees as the snow and ice make them look like granulated sugar. Laurie also writes, a dog trotted past like a ghost in a cloud, panting his aura around him. The cloud that Lee refers to is the frosted breath we get in the cold. This extract starts in the passive descriptive voice and then changes to the active voice. Bear in mind, when we talk about structure, it can be microstructure, so talking about things like exclamatory sentences, use of commas, semicolons, dashes, listing, that kind of thing, or macrostructure, which refers to the order of ideas in the text. So pause the video now and jot down your answers to the 2 questions. What have they done well? How could it be improved? So in terms of what they've done well, they've got an embedded quotation, hot breakfast. They use subject terminology, one-line paragraph, and we've also got one-word analysis with the word hot. The first little paragraph is talking about structure, so the order of ideas, how the writing is, the order of ideas in the writing, how ideas are presented. Then the middle paragraph is talking about language. We've got terminology in there, metaphors, similes, and description. We've got a reference to the question and talking about the reader. And finally, a single sentence about structure again, referring to terminology. So it is a good answer. In terms of how it could be improved, you should be using the writer's surname, referring to word classes. So instead of the word hot, the adjective hot is describing a noun. They could embed the quotation they use in paragraph 2, shorten the second quotation, and they need to explore the effect of the passive descriptive voice. Remember, just identifying techniques won't get you very far. You need to explore the effect of those techniques as well. So please do make a note of what was good about it and how it could be improved. And I would do this on your extract. So this answer was written by a Woking student in her 2017 exam. She got a grade 9 in English language. What makes this answer better? Lee begins by mentioning the hot breakfast in a short one-line paragraph. The shortness of this paragraph separates the heat from the assumed cold of winter. The adjective hot reiterates this contrast between warmth and cool, which illustrates Lee's intention to explore the idea of the cold and what it brings with it, as he is setting it apart from normal life and suggesting it is special. Lee uses multiple metaphors and similes throughout this description, such as saying the trees are confections of sugar and the dog was like a ghost in a cloud. The comparison of trees with sugary confections suggests that they have the same crystalline structure, which helps the reader visualize the trees. The noun cloud that Lee refers to is the condensed breath, which is semiotic of cold and winter. Lee moves from the passive descriptive voice in lines 26 to 28 to the active voice, which illustrates both the tranquility and excitement of winter. So pause the video and consider what makes this such a good answer. So we've got a precise start. Lee begins. So this links to structure, the order of ideas in the writing. Then we've got the shortness of the paragraph, talking about the effect of the technique. Then you've got the adjective, so word class. The word reiterates. This is much more precise and shows. Again, it links to structure because you're talking about the order of ideas and how they're used. Then you've got multiple metaphors and similes throughout. Again, you've got this referring to structure, how the ideas are presented, and the order of ideas. The same crystalline structure shows this precise analysis continuing. Then you've got noun, which refers to word class, Lee by using the writer's surname, and then finally, which illustrates both the tranquility and excitement of the winter, explaining the effect of the technique. So I would add to your analysis on your text, adding in all this detailed analysis and making sure you understand what they've done, how they've done it, and thinking about ways you could write a similar answer. So pause the video to do this now. So if you have time, I would like you to now take about 15 minutes to have a go at answering the question yourself. Pause the video now to do this. Okay, and finally, I would like you to jot down 3 things you should do to improve the way you answer language and structure questions. So pause the video now to do that. Okay, and that brings us to the end of today's lesson. Thank you very much for all your hard work, and I look forward to speaking to you next time.